Hello, this is Dr. Diane Hamilton, and today we're going to discuss writing the perfect college paper. This is the checklist for the perfect paper, and the first thing we're going to discuss is the structure, which includes the introduction, the body, the conclusion. The introductory paragraph will introduce the paper. It's going to have, maybe the first sentence might include a hook to interest the reader, to get them interested about what the topic's going to be. Then the next few sentences are going to summarize the main topics that are going to be addressed in the paper. You might go through what the professor requires within the paper and base those sentences on what topics will be required within the paper, and then you're going to end the introductory paragraph with a thesis statement of what the main point of the paper is. Now, at that point, you begin the body of the paper, where all those things that you mentioned in the introduction will be addressed. You might have a paragraph or more than a paragraph per each topic, and as you write about each topic, you're going to maybe end that paragraph with a transitional sentence that leads to the next topic to be addressed, and you're going to go through each of these paragraphs in the body until you reach the conclusion paragraph, which is the last paragraph. A lot of students, maybe I'll start with in conclusion, but the last paragraph is going to sum up all the topics addressed, and then you're going to restate the thesis statement that you stated in the introduction, and then you're going to end with some kind of final prediction or conclusion. Now, the next thing we're going to discuss is the paragraphs and sentence structure. And a lot of students have problems with paragraph length, run-on sentences, and there's no hard and fast rule, but an ideal paragraph should contain 4 to 8 sentences. You don't want sentences that are much longer than 40 words. You want to keep things more concise. And there's a lot of really helpful advice on a site called Grammar Girl. I recommend Googling that, and there's so much information on that site, not just about paragraph and sentence structure, but of course grammar and a lot of other things. Another thing that students have trouble with is narrative mode. Especially my graduate students, it's probably a good idea to be used to writing in third person. Most classes that I teach, they prefer you don't write in first person. First person is when you refer to yourself. You're saying, I think this, or once I found out about that, or anytime you're using I, me, words like that, you're writing in first person. Second person, you're writing with you think this, or you did that. And then third person, you're writing he, she, it, they, but never I, or we, which would be first person, or you, which would be second person. So there's a lot of information on the web about narrative mode. I would suggest looking into that if you've had any issues, or if the professor requires that you don't write in first person. APA is probably one of the most confusing things for new students. I would suggest embracing Purdue OWL site. If you look up APA, their site probably will be one of the first ones that comes up, but I would Google that. They have great information on that site. They also have example APA papers and a lot of sources for APA help. If you can't find examples exactly of how you want to cite something, there's also something called Citation Machine. It's a website that helps students learn how to format citations and references. It's not foolproof. I think it's a pretty good site to kind of get used to putting information in to see how it will look, but I really recommend researching Purdue OWL and Citation Machine. As far as research and citations, it's important that students get used to using scholarly sources and using their school's web site. Usually it's their library where you can research through their search engine. It's not a good idea to go to Wikipedia. Most schools don't allow Wikipedia as a source because it can change, it can be manipulated, and it's not something that's considered a scholarly peer-reviewed journal. So Wikipedia might be a good place to start, and then look at the bottom for some articles of what they've used as sources for references, but I recommend that you use the school's library and check off the peer-reviewed journals part underneath. Usually it's underneath the search area when you search, and you probably come up with some better sources that way. Citing, some professors allow direct quotes, some don't. Paraphrasing is probably a better way to go if you have an option. It shows that you've digested the material and were able to put it in your own words. Direct quotes is when direct quoting, you've listed word for word what the author has written. Paraphrasing, you've taken what they've written, put it in your own words, and then both ways you've given the author credit. A lot of students like to just take big blocks of direct quotes and try to fill space, and professors don't like that. They want to see that you've actually learned what you're supposed to have learned from the material. So paraphrasing is a good thing to get used to doing. You can learn how to paraphrase on the OWL site that I mentioned previously. Just be careful not to patchwork. Patchwork is when you just put quote after quote, site after site, and you're not putting up your own information in there. You're not including your own observations. You want to have some of your own statements and then you back them up with citations. And realize that citations and references are required. You don't just have citations or just have references. The citations are within your writing. It's when you're quoting or you're paraphrasing information, and then at the end of your paper there is a reference page that lists where you obtain those citations, and the references list the sources. So you're going to need both. Plagiarism is an important topic because a lot of students don't even realize that they're plagiarizing. Sometimes they copy and paste into their paper, which they shouldn't do. Sometimes they don't put quotation marks when they need to. It's really important to get used to using Turnitin if your school allows it. Turnitin is an excellent tool that checks for plagiarism. It carries over 150 million archive papers, and there's a variety of information in there that the school's aware of that's out on the web that students sometimes don't realize they shouldn't be using. So they are aware that websites are out there where students can purchase papers, and those papers are probably in Turnitin. So be aware that the school's going to be requiring you to turn in your information and to turn it in, and if you don't, they may do it for you and find your information has been plagiarized. So be very careful. Editing, you want to check your spelling, you want to check your spacing. Spelling, the spell checker is very good at catching a lot of things, but sometimes it recommends the wrong word. So be careful to pick the right word if it gives you choices. If you're not sure, look it up. Check your spacing. I know Word documents sometimes default with an extra space between paragraphs that is not supposed to be there per APA. You want to check your after paragraph spacing settings. So within your paper, right click your mouse, click on the paragraph, the word paragraph, and then make sure that it says 0 after paragraph. If you're not sure how to do this, I do have a video on my blog that shows how to do spacing after paragraphs and a lot of other issues with all this. But be sure your spacing's correct. Like APA has changed recently so that there's 2 spaces required after a period instead of 1. Things like that are very important. You want to review the rubric. If your professor has posted a rubric, rubric is it shows what points are assigned for each part of the paper. So maybe 2 points are assigned for answering this question, 1 point's assigned for APA, another point's assigned for spelling. Whatever the assignment requires, it'll tell you how many points are assigned for each thing. Be very sure that you go through the rubric before you submit. I also recommend going to the final checklist, which covers a lot of what we talked about here. I've shortened the website to make it easier for you to write down, but this is the link on my